Well, tonight on Here and Now, more details emerge on the new plan to emerge. The province is buying back land for the St. Clair's replacement hospital at a higher cost. That story. And
there have been some potential violations of, I think, the Public Procurement Act and the Conflicts of Interest Act.
It was clearly a conflict of interest.
A new development in the House of Assembly that shows some health authority employees did profit off rental homes for travel nurses.
Musician, entertainer, and a family man. Just some of the words being used to describe Dave McHugh, who tragically lost his life on Friday.
He was so charismatic and magnetic. He drew everybody to him.
There was a depth, but you were uplifted and you were entertained the entire time.
I'm Colleen Connors, and tonight we'll talk to some people who were very inspired by Dave McHugh.
You realize the potential is here now, the options that are here.
We're not leaving people out on the street in the cold.
A years-long makeover has come to an end. We got a look inside the gathering place that's hoping to be a safe haven in St. John's.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. The province is buying back former Crown land to build the new replacement hospital for St. Clair's at more than 3 times what they sold it for. According to the land grant issued in 2016, the company H3 Development purchased Crown land off Kenmount Road for $3.2 million, and that included nearly 16 hectares of land, or 38 acres, and that puts the cost of each acre back then at around $85,000. Now, if the deal goes through, some of that land would be sold back to government for a much higher price, $23 million for 54 acres, which is about $425,000 per acre. Now, the company recently approached the province about donating 10 acres for a new hospital. Government needed more space for a larger facility, and with the donated land factored in, Transportation and Infrastructure Minister Fred Hutton says government is spending $359,000 per acre, which he says is below the market value according to H3. He says it's a good deal.
But again, this was purchased at a time 8 years ago. Land prices were quite different up there. There was no infrastructure. They've spent well in excess of $10 million. I don't know exactly how much. Again, that would be a question for H3. But to put water and sewer from that point further up Kenmount Road and into where those other businesses are located, that costs quite a bit of money, and they've done that. They've made that investment.
Well, in other news, the health minister is confirming that health authority managers were renting homes to internationally educated nurses and private agencies for their own personal benefit. But John Hogan says those leases were terminated after an investigation was launched by the previous health minister. Here Now's Mark Quinn explains.
The allegation that health authority managers were profiting by renting homes to travel nurses was first raised by the province's nurses union earlier this year. Today in the House of Assembly, PC health critic Barry Pettin asked the health minister if these allegations are true.
The previous minister had written the Auditor General about these allegations, had written the NLHS board, the chair of the board as well, to bring it to their attention and make sure it was investigated. Throughout the spring and summer, there was correspondence back and forth between the minister and the former minister and NLHS. In August of 2024, I was advised as a new minister that there were issues under the Conflict of Interest Act, and any inappropriate leases have since been terminated.
Speaking with reporters, Hogan gave some more details about what NL Health Services found in its investigation.
NLHS had investigated the issue and made a decision that there had been some potential violations of, I think, the Public Procurement Act and the Conflicts of Interest Act, and terminated any leases that would have been in violation of that. So
Hogan didn't know how many leases were terminated, but he did confirm the health authority employees would have been people in positions to hire travel nurses.
Yeah, I think that would have been the conflict of interest. I just don't know if manager is the right term for their position, but it would have been, you're right, someone in authority position.
The Progressive Conservative leader says it shouldn't have happened and should have been dealt with before the nurses' union brought the allegations forward.
It was clearly a conflict of interest, and normally one would have thought, though, that those conflict of interest should have been reported up through to the senior executive of the health authority. They should have been aware of any potential conflicts of interest and should have dealt with them.
The Auditor General's office is looking into agency nurse contracts and is expected to release a report in the coming months. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, meanwhile, the Provincial Department of Transportation and Infrastructure bought a $300,000 ferry thruster it doesn't need. According to a 2023 Comptroller General report CBC News obtained through access to information, the department has confirmed that there was and continues to be no immediate need for a new bow thruster on the MV Beaumont Hamel. The department could not provide an explanation for the purchase. The thruster was bought in 2019 and never installed. The department spent $27,000 modifying the part to fit the MV Beaumont Hamel before putting it in storage in St. John's. The report says the department then decided it was taking up too much room at the warehouse and spent $16,000 moving it to Lewisport. According to the report, that part can't be used by any of the other ferries in the provincial fleet without major modifications. Now, the investigation discovered millions of dollars of old and obsolete parts being kept seemingly for no reason at the department's main warehouse. Minister Fred Hutton says there's been a change in upper management since the thruster was purchased and that some of it was put to use.
Parts of that that bow thruster assembly, the whole package of it. We've actually used some of the materials off that on other boats like the Flanders and the Beaumont Hamel over a period of time. So some aspects of it, some portions of it have been used actually on the boats, but obviously the whole thruster itself not attached.
Well, the provincial government announced today nearly $24 million to help improve the province's justice system, and that includes hiring nearly 20 new Crown attorneys, a position that's been in critical demand. Here now's Jessica Singer reports.
Justice Minister Bernard Davis says the province will hire 18 new Crown attorneys over the next few years. That move comes after days of CBC News reporting Crown attorneys are struggling to stay on top of massive workloads.
Obviously, we want to make the system as strong as we possibly can, and putting Crowns in place, increasing the number of Crowns is an important piece to that.
Sean Padden is the president of the province's Crown Attorneys Association. He says some Crown attorneys have more than 300 files, and he previously told CBC News their understaffing is hurting public safety. The province says it will hire 6 new Crown attorneys each budget year. That number puts Padden at ease.
This can only be a good thing. If there's more prosecutors on the ground, they have more time to put into file preparation. As I indicated, many lawyers are working into the wee hours of the morning. This will help alleviate some of that strain, so you have time during the day to look at files and prepare.
Conservative justice critic Helen Conway-Ottenheimer also welcomed the new positions, but she had some doubts.
I still think that is not going to really effectively address the problem. Don't want to seem ungrateful, because we are grateful that they acknowledge that there's a problem here.
Although the province has committed to a total of 18 Crown attorneys, finding people to fill those spaces is another issue. Davis says recruiting starts now, but as for lawyers who already feel burnt out, he says the government has increased lawyer salaries and is offering retention bonuses to people in northern communities.
I'm not saying that that's the full answer. I'm standing here saying that we know that has helped. We know that we're going to work with our key stakeholders to find solutions that if this is not working, well, let's find a way we can make it work.
Other changes include new correctional officers, deputy sheriffs, and improving technology and software for the entire justice system. That'll all cost nearly $24 million. Jessica Singer, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, he's pleaded guilty to 4 charges and 4 others have been dropped. Nicholas Villeneuve, whose impaired driving contributed to the death of a Lewisport couple, appeared in Gander Court for a sentencing submission Tuesday. Troy Turner was there.
The silence of the Gander courtroom was interrupted only by the sniffling and sobbing. The emotion of the victim impact statements was raw. The recounting of the night John and Sandra Lush were killed carried vivid detail. Villeneuve sat still and silent for much of the proceedings. The Crown is recommending he spend 5.5 to 6 years behind bars for the 2019 crash. Defense is suggesting he be sentenced to a maximum of 5 years. During this week's appearance, Josh Whiteway spoke of the devastation he experienced since the crash. He was a passenger in the Lush's SUV and is now paralyzed from the waist down. In addition to his extensive physical injuries, Whiteway talked about the emotional toll the crash has had on him. He told the court, "My entire life fell in flames that night. In many ways, I am not the same person that lied on that wet July ground." He said he still smells the burning plastic, rubber, and flesh. Suzanne Lush was also a passenger in her parents' SUV. Her statement, which she couldn't bear to read herself, talked about the impact of the loss of her parents and her emotional and physical scars. She told the court her spirit is gone, her body broken. The court heard 9 statements in total, all from immediate family of Lush and Whiteway. Each called for a stiff sentence for Villeneuve, with the hopes it will deter others from driving drunk. In a statement read by his lawyer, Villeneuve said he lives in a world of remorse and thinks of the Lush and Whiteway families every day. He said if he could change it all, he certainly would. Villeneuve has been remanded to custody. He will be sentenced next month. Troy Turner, CBC News, Gander.
Well, now to the West Coast, where Corner Brook has lost one of its most well-known musicians, Dave McHugh. He was an entertainer, songwriter, proud father, and a loyal friend to many. Here Now's Colleen Connors has more on how Dave McHugh impacted the music community.
Wherever you go, no matter how far, wherever you are,
Thousands are remembering Dave McHugh today. His smile, his catchy songs. The well-known Corner Brook musician died on Friday, November 8th. He was only 57 years old.
I like whatever makes you happy, because that was him. He lived his life.
I was listening to the album last night. I gotta say, man, She's Never Made Love. Oh, so good.
And people who knew him can't stop talking about him, or his music, his kindness, and positive outlook on life. McHugh wrote and performed many hit songs with snazzy music videos. He was also a musician aboard the Norwegian Jade cruise ship. He owned McHugh's Bar on Broadway in Corner Brook. That's where Phil Power first got to know him, working as a barback in 2012.
Oh man, best boss ever, you know? This is just to kind of put like those people together in that time and that, that environment, it was his creation, his cultivation, and like it was so him, it reflected his warmth, and it was great. He was so much fun, and he was so good to you too, like he was just the best, you know.
Power, who's now a musician as well, says it was a gift to know him and work with him.
Your smile burned like 1,000 suns. Yeah, your voice, it filled every room up and left all of us wanting more of your love.
This musician quickly turned her grief of losing McHugh into a song about him.
I saw the snow falling and the leaves falling at the same time, and it just came to me.
Lavelle says he was a true mentor for her and her music career.
But it was his personality. He was so charismatic and magnetic. He drew everybody to him. Always that smile, always trying to make somebody else feel better.
Problem fixed and make everybody happy.
McHugh was the same on and off stage, filled with happiness, a smile, and a good word. While family and close friends mourn McHugh's life this week, there will be an opportunity for the public to gather for a celebration of life at the Corner Brook Civic Centre 2 to 10 on November 30th. Colleen Connors, CBC News, Corner Brook.
Well, temperatures today across the island anyway, much cooler than we've been seeing for the last little bit. Up across Labrador as well into the minus single digits. We've got a number of warnings in place, including rainfall warnings extended for most of eastern Newfoundland at the moment, and wind warnings that extend all the way across with even a wreck house wind warning in place. The weather headlines really over the next couple of days are rain, rain, and more rain. Again, I'll get into all the details coming up.
Well, massive changes to the gathering place have been revealed. The former Sisters of Mercy convent on Military Road has transformed into a new emergency shelter and affordable housing units. Here Now's Jessica Singer takes us inside for a full tour of the building.
More people are homeless in St. John's than ever, and this place hopes to be a big help. Nearly 100 people can now live and sleep here. This is the Gathering Place's Mercy House, a project that's been years in the making. This nearly 200-year-old building didn't always look like this. The Sisters of Mercy Convent was home to nuns since the mid-1800s. They helped establish the Gathering Place. When the two remaining sisters moved out in 2020, they gifted their home to help others.
When we took over the building, we took it back to the studs. We tried to retain some of the original features just to maintain the original character here. But we created living spaces similar to what the sisters had in the convent.
Mercy House is split into 4 floors. The first is an emergency shelter, 40 beds, up from 30 at the former shelter.
We've got 4 sleeping areas in this shelter, as opposed to in our temporary shelter, we just had the 2. And you will note that the beds all have a privacy barrier. So again, in our temporary space, it was one open area, didn't give very much privacy.
Grant has worked here for 4 years, since the first temporary shelter opened in 2020. Back then, there were a couple hundred guests. Now, a couple thousand.
More recently, and probably for the last year, we have been at full capacity every night, including our female beds. We've actually had to add an extra female bed to address some of that need. And unfortunately, we're at a point as well where we're having to turn people away at the door.
The hope is the rest of the building can help free up space in the shelter. The next floor is for transitional housing, with 20 beds, including 8 individual rooms.
The idea of our transitional floor is for people who've been staying in the shelter for longer periods of time and are wanting to move out of shelter but not quite ready to move into independent living in the community.
The top 2 floors are for supportive housing, with 30 rooms in total, including 2 rooms that can house couples.
So our supportive housing is for individuals who are looking for affordable, permanent housing option, but require some staff support.
There's an application and referral process for both the transitional and supportive housing programs. People will also have to pay for both housing options. Sherry Whittle is the Gathering Place's housing manager. She says they're still working out the cost of rent, but that it will be affordable. She says these new options will help prepare guests to live independently. So for her, the transformation couldn't have come sooner.
You get an extra kick in your spirit actually when you walk through. Every time I walk through, you almost you realize the potential is here now, the options that are here. We didn't have other options to tap into before. My whole spirit is just elated to know that this is what we have the opportunity to provide now.
What happens outside the building is also changing. Emergency shelter guests used to line up on Military Road. Now they'll go to an intake office at the side of the building where they're assigned a bed and a locker. Supportive housing guests will have a separate entrance through the building's main courtyard.
The main piece is that by providing housing, we're not leaving people out on the street in the cold. So hopefully that will make a big difference.
The new emergency shelter is now open, and transitional and supportive housing will be phased in over time. People can stay in transitional housing for up to 2 years, and supportive housing, that's the big change. That means some people who have struggled on the streets will finally have a permanent place to call home. Jessica Singer, CBC News, St. John's.
It's one of those things that you dream about, you see in videos.
One Newfoundland songwriter and producer has just achieved a major music milestone. He sold 500,000 albums and received a gold record for it. Well, before we get to the forecast, have a look at Happy Valley Goose Bay. A fresh dusting of snow on the ground. It's starting to look pretty wintry out there.
For sure. Some beautiful shots from the Birch Island Boardwalk taken by one of our colleagues, Zachary Russell. Now, it won't be long before that river is totally frozen over.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day too with all of that sunshine. Certainly very different than what we're experiencing here on the island.
Absolutely. Temperatures much cooler up there. You gotta love a day that is below zero and sunshine for sure. But we are dealing with cold temperatures and a lot of rain in some cases for eastern Newfoundland. Let's take a look at what's going on today out there. We've got a big change in temperatures from where we were sitting yesterday. In fact, anywhere from 5 to as much as 10 degrees colder than yesterday. Up across Labrador, pretty much the same, anywhere from 1 to about 5 degrees colder with the exception of Lab City, which you're sitting a little bit above. But your temperatures are still quite chilly, -7, -11 in Churchill Falls. But you take a look at the temperatures, big drop, and that is because of the northerly winds that we saw today. So hovering around the 0-degree mark through central, the west coast, still hanging on to temperatures above zero along southern areas of the island, and same thing for the Avalon. And these are pretty much where we're going to bottom out because temperatures are going to continue to warm up as we head into the day tomorrow. But taking a look at what's going on weather-wise, we've been seeing snow through central, at least around the Gander area for most of the day today. Wet snow. About 4 centimeters has fallen. And then on the radar, at least this radar picture showing the potential, or that we're likely seeing some ice pellets in the mix there for the Burin Peninsula back through Clarenville, even parts of the Bonavista Peninsula as well. And then on the other end of that, we are seeing still quite a bit of rain for the Avalon right now. So what is going to happen is we are going to see a lot more of that. And you can see this is tapping into a lot of moisture, and this isn't really going to change until we head into next week, it looks like. But for now, we're going to deal with this heavy rain at least through Friday. Rainfall warnings are still in place and, in fact, have been extended to include the Burin Peninsula. And then we've got wind warnings in place as well. Same as we head towards Burgeo, that wind warning is in place, and then a wreck house wind warning as well. So let's start with what's happening in the wind. Right now, most are seeing those winds gusting a little bit below warning criteria, but earlier today, certainly seeing some higher gusts. But as we head through tonight, we're going to continue to see those winds gusting, particularly exposed areas over 100 kilometers per hour. But most of pretty much the eastern half of the island will be seeing those winds gusting. By the time we get into tomorrow morning, those wind warnings should end for the Avalon. They will eventually end along the south coast of the island as well through the day tomorrow. And then Thursday night into Friday morning, that's when we're looking at the winds gusting the highest around the wreck house area. But those warnings all should be ended by the time we get into Friday afternoon. So what's going to happen tonight? The weather, what you see is what you get at the moment. Right now, we're not really going to see a whole lot of movement in where we're seeing this weather either. So expect the chance of some flurries, wet snow continuing through central, some ice pellets in the mix as well, and then these periods of rain continuing for eastern Newfoundland. Other than that, quiet weather up across Labrador and really the west coast of the island as well. But temperatures are going to eventually slowly start to warm up for the Avalon, which should be about 6 degrees, but otherwise staying really chilly up across Labrador. -14 and -15 will be the overnight lows. As we head into tomorrow, this will slowly creep across the island. So we're going to see a little bit of a wintry mix for the west coast. This will head towards southeastern Labrador tomorrow, but the temperatures are going to warm up. So everything should change back over to rain across the island with this freezing rain potential extended to maybe even about 10 millimeters of freezing rain rather for the Eagle River area. So freezing rain warning is in place, and that again will be for your Friday. As far as the rainfall amounts go, still looking at over or close to, I should say, about 100, maybe even 120 millimeters of rain left to fall. And that will take us to Friday afternoon. Weather tomorrow, temperature-wise, like I said, warming up quite nicely, 10 to 12 degrees. Those winds changing back to southwesterlies. That's why we're seeing that warm up. Hanging on to those northeasterlies, though, as you heard, head further west. And again, your temperatures are going to be cooler, but they'll still be gusting around 60 kilometers per hour. Labrador, for the most part, you are going to enjoy another beautiful but chilly day tomorrow, minus single digits for central and western portions of Labrador. Towards the coast, you'll be hovering around 1 to 3 degrees, but expect the weather to move in, like I said, through the really through the day along the strait there, with some showers expected. I'll get into the long-range forecast coming up a little later.
Well, how does a songwriter and producer from Lewisport end up with one of these? Well, Peter Daniel Newman is about to tell us. This is a gold record from the Recording Industry of America. Now, you only get one of these when you sell 500,000 albums. Peter Daniel Newman co-wrote the hit song Georgia Girl on Megan Maroney's album Lucky. Congratulations, Peter.
Thank you so much.
So 500,000 copies of an album is huge. Can you talk about how it feels to be part of a project that ended up being so successful?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I've grown up playing music in Newfoundland and Labrador, like lots of people here, and was in a band in high school. And it's one of those things that you dream about. You see in videos, you see magazines. I had a subscription to Rolling Stone, and it's one of those things as a kid that seems almost impossible or out of reach. Or how do you even get one? And then I fast forward, and I was working in Nashville. Just lucky enough to be working with Megan Maroney, who at that time didn't have a record deal or a single hit, and it was just a bit of luck, a bit of talent, and a bit of hard work, and next thing you know, you get a gold record.
So the song that you co-wrote with her was Georgia Girl.
That's right.
Can you talk a bit about that luck
Sure.
and how that came about and what the process was like?
I actually ended up getting management in Nashville, and what they end up doing is lining up co-writes with all the artists that are in Nashville. Obviously, a lot of people end up in Nashville to try and get a record deal. So I ended up writing with a lot of people, and one of those people was Megan Maroney, and she's being developed by Christian Bush of Sugarland. And she came in, and she's an incredible writer and singer herself. And it's kind of easy when somebody's that talented just to throw around ideas. And she's from Georgia. She wanted a song that kind of represented her state. We came up with an angle on the song and wrote it pretty quickly, probably around 2 hours. We wrote the song, and that was it. And like a lot of songs, I tend to write 150 to 200 songs a year. So it's just one of those songs. You don't know if it's going to stick or whatever. And then you find out, you get an email here that she signed a deal with Sony. And then you get a further email that the song's in consideration for the record. And then later on, you'll find out that the song makes the record. There's all these steps that can go, bad potentially. I've had a few that didn't make records. And this one made it to the record. And she became really a household name in about a year. Mm-hmm. And she's now one of the top country artists in the world, with obviously a huge career. And a lot of people compare it to Taylor Swift. Her record went #1 on Rolling Stone. So, you go from 0 to 1,000.
So what is next for you? Can you tell us, what you're doing now and what's down the road that you foresee for you?
Sure, absolutely. Well, someone was asking what I was doing this morning, and typically I work on multiple projects at once. I was working for I send off a track for a demo singer to sing on something that's going to a Tim McGraw. I'm working on, I have to do a demo for a Canadian band called the Hunter Brothers. Ty, the lead singer, emailed me earlier. And then I'm also working on a kid from California who's managed by Bon Jovi's management. He's trying to get a deal. So I'm juggling all these things all the time. And really, you're just It's a numbers game at this point. You're just trying to work on a bunch of great projects, hoping one of them catches some steam, and maybe you get lucky enough to get another gold record out of it.
Well, Peter Daniel Newman, it's always nice to see a Newfoundlander who is successful in their field, and even better when that Newfoundlander is still living at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in and telling us about it.
I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
You. Returning now to our top story, the province is buying back land it used to own, all to make room for a new hospital to replace St. Clair's. Infrastructure Minister Fred Hutton took questions from reporters today about exactly how much land the H3 development company bought and what it's now selling it for.
Some of the land in that area being developed by H3 was acquired from government.
Yep.
Is the hospital going to be going on some of that land, do you know?
Yes, a portion of it, yep.
Can you expand on just Alex's line of questioning there? So H3 had purchased land from government that's now being purchased back by the province?
Yeah, and it was done about 8 years ago. Yep. Before they developed it up there and put in the water and sewer and the infrastructure. If you drive up Kenmount Road now and turn off where Avalon Ford is on Wyatt Boulevard. There's a big open space on one side, but on the right-hand side, if you're stopped at the light heading west, there's a pumping station there, and that was put in by H3 developers. They've spent in excess of, in the last 8 years, in excess of $10 million to develop water and sewer beyond that, because water and sewer ended there. But they've developed it right up Kenmount Road and in Nils Way. All those buildings that are in there, I guess that they have developed, it's a serviced area already, and putting the road in as well.
They're selling land that they bought off the province.
Yep, some of it, a portion of it.
Yeah.
At the time, I think it was about $100,000 per acre.
For how much land?
The numbers, it was 38 acres, I think, but it was in addition to land that they had already owned up there. Both two of the members of one family, part of H3, and one member of the other, and then there was a third piece of land that they purchased, which was adjacent to the pieces that they had.
And do you know how many of the 38 acres they bought was selling back to the province?
I think it's in the range of about 27, 28, and so, but they're donating 10 of it.
Okay, if it's going to close around the same time, and I know I asked this, but why do a donation in the first place? Would it not be easy? Is there a tax advantage to it? The government's not a charity. Is there a tax advantage to doing a donation? Why not just say?
Sure, there would be, but for anybody who would be donating land to us, and that's happened in the past before.
Okay, there is a taxable benefit.
Yep.
Okay.
It is definitely a good deal, in my opinion, for the residents of Newfoundland and Labrador. We constantly hear, people expressing concerns, and not just folks who are consuming health care, if I can put it that way, the patients, but the folks who work there, and the ability to attract people to work at our healthcare facilities. If we have a new state-of-the-art, and this is going to take several years, obviously, but it's going to make us easier. It'll make it easier to attract people to come to work to a facility like that.
Canada's leaders are taking steps to try to fight racism across the country, and now a researcher is pointing to a troubling sign here in the Atlantic region, one found at a Halloween party in Cape Breton. Josh Hoffman explains.
Far-right extremism in Atlantic Canada is growing, according to research out of the University of New Brunswick. There were a combined 74 incidents throughout the region in 2018 and 2019. That's more than double the total number in the entire decade between 2000 and 2010. One researcher says the fact people thought it was acceptable to wear symbols of hate at a Halloween party in Cape Breton last month shows extremist values are in the mainstream.
Joke or not, they are essentially part of this, or symptomatic of this larger effort to make these very, very dangerous behaviors seem normal.
According to Hoffman, Nova Scotia has the highest rate of far-right extremism in the region, followed by New Brunswick. Two provinces have had relationships with the KKK that go back 100 years, according to one author who has written about the white supremacist group's activity in Canada. The group has continued to try to have a presence in the region throughout the decades, including in 1981, when members tried to open a chapter in Halifax, but were met by protest. As recently as 2017, members were found handing out recruitment pamphlets in Fredericton.
I am struck by the persistence of the same kinds of narratives and political discourse that surrounded the Klan 100 years ago, and that continues to persist today.
For Hoffman, he's concerned that as extremist rhetoric and incidents become more common, it will embolden some individuals to act violently.
This is why we need to stand up and say dressing up like the KKK is not acceptable.
Josh Hoffman, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, a BC teen with Canada's first presumptive human case of avian flu is in critical condition at the BC Children's Hospital with acute respiratory distress.
I must caution that there is a very real possibility we may not ever determine a source. But at this point, we have a number of leads that we're following.
Well, Dr. Henry said officials are working to track down the source of the infection. Health officials said the teen was not in school during the infectious period, and contact tracing on dozens of the teen's family and friends has not turned up any further cases. The teen also has no known exposure to poultry farms or wild birds where the virus is circulating. During his election campaign, Donald Trump promised mass deportations of illegal immigrants. And while he doesn't take office until January, his promise has raised concerns about a surge of asylum seekers into Canada. Immigration Minister Mark Miller was asked about border security earlier today.
I think when it comes to our southern border and the U.S.'s northern border, you see there the alignment of interests and making sure that it is safe, that it is secure. We share information with our American partners, and we're able to apprehend folks that cross the border in a regular fashion or in a fashion where they're not entitled to do it.
And 10 years after Canada's mission in Afghanistan ended, a group of Afghan Canadians are speaking out about their pivotal role. They provided linguistic and cultural advice to the Canadian Armed Forces, but as Olivia Stevanovich reports, they still haven't been recognized.
We have been ignored. We have been discriminated.
They were the eyes and ears of the Canadian Armed Forces, saving lives in Afghanistan. But when they returned home, they were denied the same benefits and health coverage as other veterans.
Now we have PTSD. We are sick.
I have no health coverage. I have no help from the Department of National Defense. Not even a call, not even appreciation, not even something to invite you, even for Veteran Days. I have to invite myself.
When the Afghan war began, Canada's military recruited these Afghan Canadians as not just translators, but advisors to interpret the culture and conditions.
You didn't go anywhere outside the wire without your LCA, and they took exactly the same risks that we did, dressed in the same uniform that we had. The only difference is they weren't armed.
Indeed, they looked like members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but because they were civilians on temporary contracts, the Department of National Defense denied them benefits and health coverage.
It's a shame, actually. These people served in so many ways alongside military men and women who served. A lot was asked of them.
We should be moving heaven and earth now that we know about it to make sure these LCAs get the supports that they deserve.
Opposition parties say they plan to raise the issue with the Minister of Defense as soon as Parliament resumes next week.
Canada has a moral obligation to support the people who supported our country in the mission in Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, Canada's military watchdog is conducting her own investigation.
If the country and the department fails to act, I think they're going to have a very hard time making the case to recruit people to do this type of work moving forward.
In a statement, the Defense Minister's office says he's aware of the challenges and is working with DND's Ombudsman, who is expected to release her final report early in the new year. Olivia Stevanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
So here's what we've gathered from talking to local residents.
I spoke with a renter who's facing eviction this fall.
It is not for the weak of stomachs.
What does it mean for you to be able to give that advice and to know that you've helped? Don't look down.
If this is something that you didn't know about, let me tell you.
Heather Gillis, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
St. John's.
Corner Brook.
Shaji, Innu First Nation.
Grand Falls, Windsor.
New West Valley, Newfoundland and Labrador.
We've covered a lot of news from the House of Assembly today, but we have one more moment to share with you. A crew member from the Elite Navigator was in the legislature as the Premier gave a special member's statement recounting his ordeal from July. Known as the Lucky Seven, all crew members were found floating on a life raft 2 days after their boat caught fire.
Thanks to the efforts of the fishing community, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the boat owner, Glenn Moland, who never gave up hope, the Elite Navigator was found. The crew, Eugene Carter, Dave Tiller, who is here with us today in the Speaker's Gallery, Toby Peddle, Harold Howard, Andy Hunt, Jordan Lee King, and Robbie Frimmerge were safely returned to their loving families. Mr. Speaker, I will never forget the day as we celebrated, along with thousands of others in New West Valley, as the Lucky Seven entered their home port. I want to take this opportunity to recognize the incredible strength and resilience of the crew, and once again, thank everyone involved in the search and rescue effort for making this an ending we will all remember throughout our province for years to come. Please join me in giving Dave and the rest of the crew a round of applause.
Ashley, what a wonderful story that was over the summer with all the negative things that have been happening in the world. The Lucky Seven, that was a great one there in July. So let's talk about the weather. Let's look at the long-range forecast. We were getting that funnel of rain just coming up from the tropics. How much longer is that going to continue?
It's really not going anywhere until we really head into next week. The long-range forecast showing pretty much rain right through that. But there is a little bit of change in what's going to happen, especially up across Labrador, because you've been seeing some fairly nice weather. Let's take a look at what's going on with this system as well. So it has been chilly up across Labrador, and that is kind of going to set the stage for our next, or for this system to move north. And also, there is the risk that we're going to see some freezing rain, some extended periods of freezing rain, in fact, for Thursday night into Friday in the Eagle River area, where you are looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of freezing rain, which could amount to as much as 10 millimeters in that time frame. We do have some warmer air moving in, though, and that is going to keep things rainy for southeastern portions of Labrador and all of the island. In fact, still dealing with some periods of rain in the east as well. We'll see a little bit of a break as we head into Friday evening and even into Saturday. It looks like the rain will still be there, but it won't be the heavy rain that we've been seeing. And we'll see that potential for some freezing rain head towards areas like Happy Valley Goose Bay, potentially into the evening hours as well. Daytime highs on Friday will still be quite warm, 11 to 12 degrees for most of the island. Northern Peninsula, you're going to sit in the single digits. That's the story for southeastern portions of Labrador as well. Once we see that change over to rain, the rest of Labrador, the north and the west coast, will still stay a little bit below, well, somewhere between -2 and +2 with some sunshine. Your weather will move in later on in the day on Friday. As we head Into Saturday, there's that area of low pressure, like I said, bringing some of that wintry mix to Lab West and then eventually the north coast. And we're still going to see some showers and then some periods of rain will develop along the southern areas of the island. It's your turn to see some of that heavy rain, and that will continue through the day. We're still dealing with these warm temperatures, though, anywhere from 9 to 14 degrees. Again, a little cooler for the northern peninsula. And eventually temperatures across Labrador will sit above zero through the day on Saturday as well. Anywhere from about 1 to 7 degrees through the afternoon. The one thing is, with this rain, it is going to stay mild. Temperatures will sit between 10 to 12 degrees as we get into the beginning of next week for St. John's and eastern Newfoundland. We're looking at a similar forecast through central Newfoundland, in fact, maybe even a degree or two warmer, but we will see those temperatures drop for western Newfoundland back down to the single digits, but still 6 to 9 degrees. Again, still looking at rain right through Monday rather. And then for eastern Labrador, you're looking at some shower activity through Monday and then dropping back down below zero for western Labrador with some light snow in the mix by the time we get into Monday. Our weather photo of the day is from Lewisport. Take a look at this great shot. Nice sunset. Lovely photo there. Thank you to Irene for that. If you have any weather photos that you would like to share with us, you can do that by sending them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Oh, gorgeous. I love that, Irene. And the yellow almost matches the color of the yellow house there, the yellow building. Just gorgeous. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ashley. And thank you at home for spending part of your evening with us. Hope you can join us again tomorrow. Good night.